Second 2010 Placer County Planning Commission meeting. Let's start the meeting with a salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nicole, would you do a roll call, please?
Mr. Denayo? Absent. Mr. Sevenson?
Here.
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Moss?
Here.
Mr. Crabb?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Brentnall?
Here. Okay, 6 out of 7. That's certainly a quorum. Paul, do you have any words of wisdom for us this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Thompson with the Planning Department, and good morning. Just a few items, just going to let you know what's coming up on the May 13th Planning Commission. There we'll have a modification of Chapter 16, that's the Subdivision Ordinance, and that'll be presented by the Engineering and Surveying Department. And a potential, we're doing our best to hopefully not have this on the agenda, Auburn Racket Club lighting issue. It seemed there is some lights that got put up on some courts, and we're looking, the neighbors are quite upset about that. So we're trying to work between the neighbors and the owner of the Racket Club to try to address everybody's concerns. But if those can't be addressed, we'll be in front of the commission on the 13th. The Bunch Creek rezoning project, some of the commissioners I'm sure are aware of that project. It was before your commission some time ago, went to the board, and now there is a revised projects that will be in front of your commission, as well as the Ag Commission and the WACMAC. In fact, I believe it was in front of the WACMAC last night. So that'll be on the May 13th. Also, we'll be processing a general plan amendment for the Sunset Industrial Area to establish a community facilities district for fire service there. That'll be in front of your commission. And depending on the outcome of today's hearing relating to Miners Ridge and the request for continuance, that will be on your agenda as well. After that, May 27th, tentatively, maybe the Bohemia project and an extension of time for Robinson Newcastle's quarry operation.
I'd like to see the Bohemia at the end of June. That's going to be a big, big issue.
Right, and that may happen. It just depends on the completion of the final EIR. I know they're almost there, but it may be going into the June timeframes.
Okay. Any comments, questions?
Do we have anything on the 13th? Are we meeting on the 13th?
Yes.
Don't worry, Paul. He's this way when he gets back from Hawaii.
Is this February?
He just listed all the things that are on the May 13th
April.
agenda.
But we are meeting on the 13th,
Yes, yes,
and we are meeting on the 27th. Ooh, I
yes.
may have to be at TRPA that day. That's the way it is.
Man's got to know his priorities.
When I'm told to go, I go.
If Bohemia doesn't happen on the 27th, we may cancel that meeting and go to June. And if there's only one right now, you're right. If there's only one item on, well, there's two right now on the 27th. Celebration Church. That's a pretty big project up along Interstate 80 at the Dry Creek Road exit. So that
Can't be that big. We haven't had anybody in here telling us about it yet. So.
just wait.
So this is on for the 27th,
What was
So-
the name of that project?
Celebration Church, right at the I-80 Newcastle Road exit, right there. It's over on the, I guess would be the east side of Interstate 80, kind of a grassy area, some oak trees. It
You
has-
said Newcastle or?
You meant
Dry Creek?
Dry
Dry
Creek.
Creek, Dry Creek
Yeah,
Road.
you said Newcastle.
Oh, sorry,
And there's gas stations there.
yeah.
Dry Creek, Dry Creek.
That's it.
Okay.
The very first thing that you mentioned about the next meeting,
Yes?
repeat it, please.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The first item that you mentioned?
Modifications to the subdivision ordinance?
Yes. Concerning?
That's, I believe that's just an update of the existing ordinance. There's some additions that need to happen with that, and so it's just more of an update, bring everything current.
Okay.
To current requirements, standards for the county.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
All right, thank you.
At this point, I know we have one lady here who wants to participate in the public comment session when she can comment on matters that are not on today's agenda. Give us your name and welcome.
Hi, my name is Carrie Bartley. I live on Aaron Drive, and for the record, I'm handing in a letter today that I tried to hand in last meeting. Anyway, this is about the Bohemia project. To whom it may concern, the Bohemia retail project, currently proposed as a superstore or club store, fails to comply with a number of important goals and policies contained in the Auburn-Bowman Community Plan. It fails to encourage compatibility between neighboring land uses. It fails to maintain the character of established residential areas. It fails to protect what is now an open space. It fails to protect existing native vegetation. It fails to retain natural features as buffers between different uses. It fails insofar as the height and scale of the proposed building are not compatible with that of the surrounding residential development. It fails to place significant parking in either the rear or the side of the building. It fails to adhere to Policy Q under specific policies for commercial to encourage the development of professional offices and similar low-intensity commercial uses as a buffer between retail, commercial uses, and adjoining residential developments. Because of these deficiencies, I request that the proposal be rejected or significantly revised. I also have concerns about the validity of the socioeconomic projections in Section 16 of the Bohemia Retail Project Draft EIR. As stated on page 16-5, the projections of retail growth were based on trends established between the years 2000 and 2006. Our country has been in a recession since that time, and it seems likely that these trends are no longer valid. In fact, the trend may be downward instead of upward in most cases. Furthermore, the projections of population growth for California Department of Finance is from a study published in July of 2007. It is likely that these projections are no longer valid given the change in the economy over the past several years, because population growth is often tied to economic growth. Beyond that, the rate of population growth cited is county-wide and not applicable to Auburn. Lincoln, Roseville, and Rockland saw enormous growth a few years ago, while Auburn did not. The numbers were skewed in favor of the developer, obviously. The study subtracts a small amount in the growth rate for Auburn, but the growth rate used in projections, 1.8%, is still more than double the growth rate experienced between 2000 and 2010. With all these deficiencies, the rest of the studies involving supply and demand and the ability of the local economy to recover from the impact of a superstore, big box, or club store are overly optimistic and therefore invalid. The county should perform its due diligence and demand a revision to all the socioeconomic data. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie, and you said that you didn't turn it in or failed or something. We'll gladly accept your letter if you care to give it to the commission's clerk right here in front of me. Thank you for your comment. Is there anybody else wants to discuss anything that's not on today's agenda? Seeing nobody, we'll move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the extension of time for the conditional use permit for the Auburn Alzheimer's Care Center. Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners? Before you today is a request for an extension of time to exercise an approved conditional use permit and variance to parking. The Auburn Alzheimer's Care Center was approved by your commission on May 8th of 2008. In addition to the conditional use permit, a variance to the parking ordinance was also approved to allow for 53 on-site parking spaces where 64 would be required. Mitigated negative declaration was also approved for the project on that date. entitlements there. This is the project site. It's about a quarter mile northeast of the building here, pretty close by. This is an aerial. The image shows zoning and surrounding development, all of which is medical, office, and assisted living. The project was found to be compatible with all neighboring land uses. And this is a site plan. You can see it doesn't show too much detail, but it does show the parking areas. It shows the circulation. It shows the perimeter of the building, and also shows the outline of the interior courtyard. Immediately following the approval of the conditional use permit, the applicants completed a design review agreement. Shortly thereafter, in August of 2008, the first set of improvement plans was submitted. The applicant has been diligent in exercising the permit, but is requesting additional time to secure funding in order to pay the final development fees. No changes to the project or circumstances have occurred which would warrant additional environmental review. Therefore, staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the requested extension of time for the use permit and the variance, and this is subject to the findings and the modified conditions of approval contained in the staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hey, Jerry, are there any questions for? Any questions for Jerry? Wow, you wowed us, thanks.
All right.
Is there anybody in the public who would like to address this issue? If so, please come forward, give us your name, and tell us what you have to say.
Casey Fikert, TSD Engineering. I'm here to represent the applicant, which is JEA Senior Living. We have reviewed the 3 modified conditions. We have no issues with that. We accept them as they were written, and we are here for questions or if you have any comments.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Fikert? I guess not. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak on it? If not, I will close off the public input portion and bring it back to the commission for discussion and/or motion.
So I would make a motion that due to the fact that the proponent has exercised due diligence throughout the improvement plan process, that we approve the extension of time for the Auburn Alzheimer's Care Center, subject to the findings and modified conditions and CEQA findings, and extension of time and the conditions associated with it.
You're referring to the findings that are printed in our staff report?
Right.
Okay, I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. It passes. Thank you. We've got a few minutes before we can start the next one. So far, so good.
Well, I had a question. Nice replaces around, although I didn't like.
It's 10:15, so let's press on with the next item, which is the 10:15 item, subdivision modification for Coyote Ridge. And Michael, you have this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Wells with Planning. First one up here. The commission approved the tentative map for the Coyote Ridge subdivision in 2003. It's located on a 105-acre parcel. It's in rural North Auburn area off of Bell Road. It's about a third of a mile northwest of the Joger Road, Bell Road intersection. Subdivision consists of 12 parcels. Each of them are 4.6 acres, consistent with zoning, and an open space lot of about 44 acres. Again, this is Bell Road here as it curves around. Project entrance is up here at the northwest corner, and there's a single roadway that's been constructed, ends in a cul-de-sac. Emergency access at this location here on a private drive that accesses Bell Road. The applicant is Mr. Thomason. He's the project developer as well. He did construct the site improvements that include the roadway, frontage improvements on Bell Road, and the utilities. Since the approval of the map, there have been 2 homes constructed. One some time ago is a spec house on Lot 1 at this location. It's currently being rented. Second house was recently completed here on Lot 8, and this is the Morton Residence, and they're here today to talk to you. The applicant states that since he completed all his improvements, there's been several instances of cars speeding on the property, vehicles crashing, vehicles driving off-road, dumping of garbage, and vandalism. Recently, we received a letter from the Mortons, again, they live on Lot 8, that addressed possible illegal activities on the private property there. In their letter, they state that they believe that in order to provide security to the site and reduce potential liability to the county and to the homeowners association, that they think that a gate should be constructed at the Bell Road entrance over here. And they did approach the project applicant and with this idea. About 5 or 6 months ago, in response to these concerns, Mr. Thomason did put in a couple of gates. These are Forest Service style gates, the type that just kind of swing in and out. Put a gate up here and put a gate by the emergency access. He checked with CAL FIRE. Brad Albertazzi went out there, and he says you got to put the Knox box type of locks on there so that they can get in and out. Brad also told Mr. Thomason that the gates could remain that way until about half of the development was sold out. In other words, when 6 lots have been developed, he has to revisit talking to the fire about locking the roadways there. Just recently, Mr. Thomason came to the office and talked to us about installing permanent gates on the site. We pointed out to him that there is a condition of the subdivision, it was condition 69, that states that the Planning Commission would need to approve a modification to the subdivision to allow for a gated entry on Bell Road. This is the gate that he's proposing to construct. And that's a diagram of how it would be constructed off of Bell Road. We have had discussions and pointed out that staff has 3 issues here that we have to deal with. One is consistency with the Auburn-Bowman Community Plan. There are goals in the plan that basically discourage, and that's their word, isolated, remote, and walled-off developments. Staff's interpretation of this is to expand this to gated entries. Second inconsistency has to do with the rural design guidelines. Rural design guidelines apply to subdivisions in the county over 4 lots in size, and the lots have to be bigger than 1 acre. And so it does apply to this particular subdivision. There's a what they call an implementation technique in the rural design guidelines that states that gated subdivisions or communities are not appropriate in areas where these design guidelines apply. The design guidelines apply to this subdivision, therefore no gate should be constructed there. Third issue we had to deal with is the direction that's been given to us by your commission most recently in January when you were considering a gated entry for the Hidden Ravine Estate subdivision over here in North Auburn, just south of Atwood 3. Your commission voted 3-2 at that time to deny a request for a gated entry. and your findings were that gated entries in rural areas would serve to divide the communities and also create separate segregated communities. So we took this as direction. Your decision was appealed to the board, and the board agreed with your findings and overturned or denied the appeal. On April 13th, we went to the MAC with this as an action item. The MAC voted 3-2 to recommend the commission approve this modification, and their finding was that the potential health and safety issues were significant enough to allow for an exception to the community plan and design guidelines. Again, we have our constraints here as far as consistency with the plan and the direction given, so for this reason, staff has recommended denying the modification. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, Mike, do the existing conditions in terms of the temporary gate that has been put in, do the existing conditions permit that, or is that just something that was agreed to, I guess, by the fire department, but not the planning department?
Correct. The latter. It's not part of the project. It's not allowed, basically.
Okay.
Yep.
Anybody else have questions? Jeff?
The map in my packet is a little different than the one you have on the.
I realize that. We sent out the actual types of specifications that would be required by Public Works if this was approved, and the applicant redesigned it according to the specs that are required.
So I think that addressed a couple of my concerns. We have turnouts on both sides of the street before the gate,
Exactly.
and there is a pedestrian access also.
Correct. And also, there's no scale here, but it's going to be set back quite a ways from Bell Road, too.
Anybody else? Michael, you refer to in your packet here and in your presentation to instances of speeding vehicles, vehicle crashes, off-roading, and the like. Is there anything that would differentiate this subdivision from any other subdivision in the county that faces the same issues?
Probably not. Probably not, especially once the roads are put in and there's no development on the site. It's basically a vacant piece of property with another paved road. And it was definitely a lure for people to do what they were doing up there at the time.
But your experience has been that as these things build out, that those instances diminish?
Once you populate an area, generally, and the exception to this is, this is a very rural area. This is not, it's not Hidden Ravine over here. We know that there's going to be development going on, and there's significant development around here. These are all large parcels out here. The 4.6 are probably some of the smaller ones in the area. So it is a very, very rural area compared to a lot of the subdivisions we've considered in the past.
If the Planning Commission were to allow this subdivision to be gated, how then would we differentiate it from every other subdivision that follows it out in that area?
This was a question that was brought up at the MAC because it was a 3-2 vote. A couple of MAC members did have concerns about establishing a precedent here that somebody else would be able to follow suit on. I know the rationale that was given before for Hidden Ravine, and, the applicant certainly believed that was a cause for approving a gate. I think in here, that considering health, safety, and welfare does not make it unique. It makes it more unique, and I don't think that, I think each and every subdivision that would follow this, if they saw this, would have to prove that case on a case-by-case basis. Does that make any?
No, it doesn't. Would have to prove what? That they too have speeding vehicles, vehicle crashes, people coming in?
No, I think that, if there's incidents filed with the sheriff's department, this type of thing over a period of time, I think that there's a record of basically trespassing going on. And if this is determined to be the only means to put a curb on it, then fair enough.
Another question.
Okay, another question, Jeff?
The roads within the subdivision, are they county maintained or are they homeowners association maintained roads?
Please, Brother.
Phil Franz with Engineering and Surveying. The roads are private roads, excuse me, with an offer of dedication to the county?
But they're not county-maintained roads?
No.
Okay. Any other questions? I guess not. Thank you, Michael. Is there anybody here who would like to address the commission on this matter? If so, please come forward. Give us your name and tell us what you have to say. I guess in your case, give us both names.
Oh, okay. Great, thanks. Good morning. I'm Candace Morton. I live in Lot 8.
I'm Jeff Morton.
We are the ones who sent you all that wonderful information. I think that there needs to be a little bit of a emotional as well as a logical standpoint on this. Since we have moved into the neighborhood, starting from when we constructed the house, you've seen a full account of a lot of testimonials from things that have happened. I think it goes beyond speeding cars. I realize subdivisions have those problems. We all do. However, what I'm finding is that being on a private road at the end of a road and living in a subdivision that's extremely rural yet close to town, we are getting a lot of riffraff. And it isn't just speeding cars and accidents, and actually pretty bad accidents where cars are being towed away with teenagers that look underage. But it's also people who are drinking and driving. And I think I want to emphasize, if anything, out of all the things that have happened, and granted there are a lot, there has been firecrackers that were, I feel, deliberately set off a couple of inches away from dead grass in front of my home while it was being constructed. They could have done it anywhere. They could have done it in the court. They could have done it in the middle of the street. They could have done it further down the street. But they actually set the firecrackers off in front of my home while it was being constructed 2 weeks after the Auburn fire. I feel that with our situation, we are different than other subdivisions. Subdivisions that are more closer into town might have the access of people around them to hear somebody yell for help, see some fire that's been started. Our homes are tucked away amongst a lot of trees. When you drive down that road, especially at night, people don't even know your home is there. So it's the perfect location. It's a flat road. It doesn't have a whole lot of bends and turns. It's prime spot. I took the liberty of, really researching this out. I talked to every single neighbor on Miracle, and I talked to every neighbor that would be affected on Bell Road. And unanimously, every single person was in favor of the gate because of all the problems that they've been having. And they see it too. And as you can see, the comments that were sent to you guys, we even have support from neighbors here today who can't believe that we have to actually kind of deal with this. We don't have highway patrol support because it's a private road, and the sheriff, usually if they come out, is after the fact. You might even have read that in some of those with the gunshots, the sheriff department came out, or never even came out, with a gunshot request on a 911 call. So, and that's well prior to the forest gate being put up. That was during construction. So, when I look at the two plans that we are addressing today that would possibly not be in favor of the gate, the Auburn-Bowman plan, in my opinion, says that they are discouraging walled-off communities. When I picture walled off, I picture, something that is a little bit more of a fortress-looking thing. We do not have that. We have open field fence, which actually the county made us put in as a development, that keeps all this open space. The developer had done a fabulous job, and that's actually the words of several of the neighbors, a fabulous job of putting in a development that allows for a wetland area, an open space area, and this open field fence so that all the neighbors can enjoy the greenery. To me, that's a rural setting. We also have the walking access that we're going to be incorporating into the gate. And we get a lot of people from Miracle who love walking, and we've met many of our neighbors prior to this whole thing just because they're walking and using our street. And so we are not denying access of our community. We're not sitting there saying you can't come in at all. In fact, we encourage people to be walking through our community. One of the things that I wanted to also say about the rural design guidelines is I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's a Placer County rural design guide plan. If I'm mistaken, let me know. But when I look at that, the item that was cited in the rural design guidelines was saying that gated subdivisions are not appropriate. And when I look at that particular guideline and I look at Placer County, I actually had pulled up, I don't know, maybe about 20 subdivisions that were having more than 4 lots, that were over 1 acre, and were gated in Placer County alone. So I'm not on the commission, so if I'm speaking out of turn, I guess, I need to be corrected. However, when I look at the Auburn-Bowman plan and its focus is not to isolate and wall off, I don't believe we're doing that with our subdivision. And when I look at the rural guidelines for Placer County, I see a lot of subdivisions that are fitting those, not more than 1 acre and not more, less than 4 lots. And I feel that there's plenty of those out there. To me, these are, in my opinion, ordinances, or not ordinances, and they're just guidelines. And when we're talking about the safety of people, I'm having a real hard time, sitting there walking up to a car with 4 people sitting there drinking and smoking pot, having sex, and drinking and smoking their cigarettes and throwing them out and throwing their beer bottles out, and having it be me who has to be the one approaching them, or my husband. And having that be that the reason for me putting myself in danger, putting our neighborhood in danger, having the neighborhood be in support of a gate, and having it be that we're just kind of interpreting these guidelines to fit everything, and have it be that it's a plan that was developed a long time ago. Auburn has changed in 16 years, and we have a serious potential problem there. And I just would hope that you guys would look at this as being a unique instance, and that, any time a gate is proposed to you in the future, you guys all have the right to decide, but there are gray areas to these things. They're just guidelines. So I guess I've said my piece, but I'm appealing to the safety issue, really, and the fire hazard issue on this. In fact, in the Auburn-Bowman plan, it specifically states, and I included that in my my letter, stating that in the Auburn-Bowman plan, number 16 says, protect the lives and property of the citizens of the Auburn area from unacceptable risk resulting from fire or flood hazards. To me, that's one of your goals of the Auburn-Bowman plan, as well as protecting the rural setting. So, I'm trying to appeal to that as well. So, you have anything you want to say? Or?
What's left?
What's left to say? I mean, I'm sorry I rambled a little bit, but, it is an emotional thing for me. It's not about getting a gated community. It's about being safe.
Understand, and we do have your letter here as part of our presentation. Thanks to both of you for coming up.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to address the commission? Please, sir, come on up.
My name is Wes Eisenaugh, and I live on Miracle Drive, which is adjoining the Coyote Ridge development. And I completely concur with her assessment of the whole situation. We weren't worried too much about fire up there until the road was open and we had a lot of strange people in there doing a lot of strange things. And if they put a gate in there, it's not going to inhibit our walks in the area at all. And I think everyone living on our street, where there are 9 houses, enjoy going into the area and walking in the area. We've seen numerous situations, especially at late at night, where we wonder what's going on. I live directly across from the cul-de-sac, where most of the activity likes to take place. And it's a little irritating, quite frankly, that they can't keep this stuff out, because nobody has any business driving around up there at 1 o'clock in the morning unless they're going home, and they don't have a home there.
Wes, how long you lived there?
Pardon?
How long have you lived there?
Since 1989.
Okay, certainly prior to this subdivision going in.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you have these kind of issues up there prior to this subdivision? going in?
Pardon?
Did you have these kind of issues up there before the subdivision went in?
No, because there was no road there before, and there was no vehicle access. People who do mischief seem to like to have vehicles that they can get around in, I guess is a way to put it. When people, we would still walk out there in the weeds and stuff, and it would be fine. On our road, which is adjoining, we're a dead end, and the houses are much closer to the road, and all the houses are occupied. And we've had people come up there, but they get scrutinized very quickly.
Okay. So you're all built out on your road then?
Yeah,
Okay.
on Miracle Drive. So it's something that we as residents on that street would like very much to see.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? I could have sworn there was somebody. Well, come on up.
My name's Dean Doty. We live on Miracle Drive, adjacent to Wes here. We also look out over that common area and the road that goes across through there. We, in fact, were the ones that called the sheriff for the gunshots. Having been a hunter, I actually know what gunshots sound like. We were actually out walking on that road in the evening. It was getting almost dark, not quite. Car was parked in the center of the road, around the corner where people couldn't see it, and people were out in the field. Now, it's almost dark. There's no reason for them to be out in the trees. There were a couple of people out there. We kept walking, went down to the end of the road, turned around, came back. We got about 200 yards away from the car when we saw or heard the gunshot. At that point, we decided, this isn't safe. We're not about to walk into whatever's going on there. So we kind of got off the road into the trees. At that point, we called 911 and said, hey, there's people out here in the trees. It's dark. They shouldn't be. There's gunshots going off. Come out, see what's going on. Well, we waited probably 5, 6, 7 minutes. Of course, the operator said that they would send an officer out. The officer never showed. About 5 minutes later, the people, or at least one of the two people, which is kind of strange to me because there were two people talking, only one of them got in the car and drove away. We never did see the other one. I don't know where that one went. We, after they drove away, of course, we went on, walked past the car where it was at least, and then back home. Sheriff never came out. Sheriff never followed up at our address. We gave him our address across the street there at the Miracle Drive address. No one ever showed up. So that to me says that there is a high concern for safety. Living on the Bell Road and in that rural area, the response time didn't seem to be adequate for what we think. So the more people we can keep out of that area by using the gated access, if you will, that makes us feel a whole lot safer, even on Bell Road, or I mean not Bell Road, but Miracle Drive, not necessarily just on their road. So we support it 100%. And I think, again, it's a good issue to have happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Doty. Anybody else?
I'm Dale Smith. I live at 3410 Sunshine Way. It's just a very short distance from this. And I do not let my wife and her friends go out to that area to walk anymore just because of this problem. And it was wonderful. Miracle Drive is a great walk up through there and the trees and everything. But since that development come and the way people are, it has become a real hazardous area. And I think having experience in my own neighborhood where we're able to get in a gate, in spite of these rules, we've found it working very well for our community, and I think this is a good place to make it work for that community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, Mr. Smith? How far away from this property do you live?
I would say about a mile.
About a mile?
Maybe a mile and a half. I
Okay,
never
thank you.
have worked it out, but we walked from our house down there.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else want to comment on this item? If not, I will cut off the public input and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Motion, something.
See, I guess I wanted to discuss the existing gate a little bit. in terms of, I went out and looked at this, and there's what they call a Forest Service gate up that when I drove by, it looked like it was being held back by a string, and it actually was partially closed, so part of it hung out in the road. And I guess the issue I have with that gate is probably a pretty significant safety issue, because in my background in forestry, what they used to call things like that is a Jill poke. If somebody were to be driving out of the subdivision and clip the gate, the gate would swing and actually have the potential to do, with the momentum of the car or vehicle, have the potential to do significant damage to the car or the person involved. And so just the mere presence of that gate there as it exists is an issue for me. It seems to me if we're going to have a gate like that up in a subdivision, that we should have some oversight in terms of some standards as to what the gate should be. I don't know if there's some county position on that, or if the county's looked at that, but to me that seemed to be a significant hazard that exists out there. And then I guess beyond that, I think when you talk about public safety issues, one of the things that I notice about the Auburn area is it seems like people feel most comfortable if they live on a cul-de-sac drive with only one way in and one way out, or if you have a gated community that you can keep what you would call a riffraff out of. But the problem I have there is if you have gates on both ends, or just even have a one-way in, if you need to go out of the neighborhood, if you're a resident of the neighborhood and you need to get out because of incidents like the 49 fire, that you're either going to have to wait for the sheriff or the fire department to come let you out through the back entrance with the lockbox, or else you're going to have to find a way to get through a gate that everybody knows sometimes malfunction. Also, I would be concerned too if you have emergency vehicles responding out to that area, then they got to make it through a gate. And so I think it's a double-edged sword sometimes to say that you're safe in a locked up community. So I guess with that said, I do really have a sense for the problem that's going on out there. I don't know if we have the ability to bring the situation into compliance by permitting, a temporary gate there until such time as, say, the subdivision is halfway built out, where it seems like when that happens that the amount of people who live in subdivision will have a deterrent effect on the use of the area for just kind of a way back, go hideout place. And so I guess I do have a big concern with this being a permanent all-time gate out there, because I think the situation would wane as the subdivision ultimately builds out. Though I do understand now with the economy that it's probably going to be a while.
Thank you, Rich. Any other comments? Well, let me add in. Oh, Jeff, you want to say something?
I guess if the problems are occurring, I guess during the evening more than not, that's the time. Is it an all-day issue, or?
The fireworks were set off at 6:45 in the morning.
So it takes care of my comment. I guess what I was leaning towards is the ability to have a gate there that's open during the day, but then can be closed up in the evening to where they can have a little security and privacy kind of thing.
The issue of a gated community has been one that has plagued the Placer County for years. I've been on this commission for 14 years, and I've seen this come up in various occasions. It's the same argument, same layout, just different locales. The only one that I can recall recently that we approved was one down in Granite Bay that was immediately adjacent to the Granite Bay High School. And the problem there was, in addition to the same complaints that you have, Mrs. Morton, was that the kids parked on the street and the kids walked there and the kids, this, fill in the blank with the offense of your choice. And then they would climb through their yards and over the fence to get to school, and it kind of reminded me of ants going to a picnic. The community was being invaded, and I think we decided as a commission that that did in fact justify a variance or a change to the policy that Placer County has set forth with respect to these gated communities. As a policy, the county doesn't want them because the debate has been had that they do in fact create divisions rather than pull people together. And Rich, you make a point that may be appropriate here, and that is that we're dealing with a subdivision that's not yet built out. And we've seen it before where when it's not built out, it invites vandalism and it's somewhat of an attractive nuisance. And things change when it gets built out, as evidenced by the folks on the street right next to them, Miracle Drive, where they don't have the problem, and of course they're completely built out. So it's always a tough nut to crack, but I think that it may be too early to address this one until we get a sense for that. I don't want to start a precedence here by saying, well, the factors here were unique, and so the one next door and the one that goes in and the one beyond that, they all of a sudden become gated, and we had this walled community that we fought so long to avoid. Comments? Harry?
Well, I would hope that each project would have to stand on its own merit. If we feel that this is needed here, then we should go ahead and approve it. If we don't, then don't. Next project is entirely different.
Of course, you're speaking objectively. What happens as a practical matter when folks come in here is,
well, I know.
well, you granted it next door, and that's...
If we make it plain, though, they all have to stand on their own merit.
Say, Harry, I guess just to kind of follow through with what you're saying, it seems like this is a unique problem in that it's a largely undeveloped subdivision. Mm-hmm. And as time progresses and the subdivision develops, and the problem is likely to go away. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, rather than a yes or no, is there a middle ground where until, like the fire department has said, when you reach halfway, then the gate comes down, but in the interim period, do you see a halfway point, or I guess where you sit on that?
I don't have a problem with that. I know that gated communities are a problem. My son lives in one in Roseville. 2 gates. Kids go in and out of there. There is nothing. They all have a combination of that gate, the kids. I don't know where they get them, but they just,
Facebook.
They get them, and they...
Okay, well, any other comments, any motions? Anybody?
Let's talk about the middle ground, maybe.
Okay.
What would be the proposal for a middle ground solution at this time?
Well, I guess what I'm thinking, of course, I'm concerned about both gates on either side because I know that we frequently, permit a emergency gate at the back, and I'm becoming more and more concerned about that because the people, in order to get out of the neighborhood, if they have to go that way, are going to have to rely on the sheriff or the fire department to let them out. But that's not the issue here. They have installed a temporary gate at the entrance, but at least from my experience with Forest Service gates, and I've worked with the Forest Service before, is that gate would not meet any standard of safety. In fact, right now, it absolutely doesn't meet the standard of safety. It's a danger to people that might accidentally bump into it. It should be locked back out of the roadway when it's open with the chain, and it should make sure that they have, for nighttime, adequate reflective material on it so people can see it. But I guess middle ground wise, if they could bring that gate up to some kind of a safety standard, and I guess it would also require a lock, a safety lock, recognizing though that can be a problem to get out of the neighborhood if you don't, if you're going to have to be let out by the sheriff, that you might have to wait a while. And so, but at any rate, if that's what's necessary to stop the vandalism that's going on, then, I think maybe there's some middle ground in using a temporary gate that really would meet some kind of a standard.
I think one of the discussions we had eons ago when we first broached this subject was the same issue. I mean, it never changes. And the issue that some of us felt was appropriate was in areas where they were requesting gated communities, but they had no one in them yet, they would be better off to wait until the communities had filled in. And I don't know that we ever arrived at a percentage of the occupancy of it, but it was felt that once the people that lived there were there, that then they should come back and ask for, as much as these people have, for the gate. And I guess what I'm suggesting is to follow along Richard's thinking, and that is let them have something temporarily. And then when they're three-quarters built out or at some point, let them come back. And if the situation is worsened or no better, then we can reconsider it. But at this time, maybe it shouldn't be, nothing should be changed. I don't know.
Not to ask a stupid question, but if you have a gate, even temporary, and you build out to some percentage of completion, even be at 100%, how do you then come back and petition the county to have your gate permanently? Because there's been no problem, I had a temporary gate.
Well, I'm under the impression this gate is not locked. It's just a gate. Is that correct or wrong?
Locks on it.
Okay, come on up, tell us.
I just thought it was a closed gate and that would just discourage people from coming in.
Okay, wait a minute. Jeff Morton, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The gate at the back at Miracle Drive, there is a Knox lock, and there's also a combination padlock that the residents know the number to. And I work for PG&E, so I'm very safety-minded. The temporary gate out front has tons of reflectors on it, but more of the issue is, it'd look nicer for the community if we had a well-made, off-the-road electronic gate that worked, rather than having a temporary force gate that, if you allowed it, could be years before all the people were in there.
How do you get out when you have that gate closed? Is there a lock? You have to get out of your car and go over and turn it? Okay, I think that's what we wanted to know.
It's a pain, but like you said, there's like some places that have courts. There's one way in, one way out. Ours is different. And, there's two ways out, and that's the other unique thing is the neighbors that they can come in the back way, and there's 105 acres surrounded by field fence, and we're not asking to wall off anything. We're just asking for a nice-looking electronic gate, and actually the beauty to Auburn is this development. Instead of having 5-6 lots down Bell Road that you drive down and you see gate, you see one, and it's off the road, and it's we're paying for it. We pay for when people dump garbage, we pay for that. We pay to maintain that road, and you saw the pictures, there's skid marks and things. So we don't want to wall anybody off, and people can come walk through there and do what they want. It's not.
Well, and the point is I think with you talking about the lock, we all do have access, so we wouldn't need to, if there was a fire, we wouldn't need to wait for the fire department. We actually all can get access in and out of there with the lock that's on there. And to keep the gate open during the day, to be honest, we've had that happen because it is a manual gate, and with the people who are renting in the home in the front, it's very hard to coordinate who's last in, who's first in, and so the gate has stayed open from time to time, and by accident. And to be honest, we come home to a lot of weird stuff happens, just on the weird occasion that we leave the gate open.
Yeah.
So, thanks.
Before you go.
I have a question.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask, I guess, engineering, does the county have a standard? I mean, if you have this pole gate, does the county have some standards that a gate like that should meet in order to be safe?
No, the county does not have a gate standard for, I think, what you're asking. We have some standards for turnarounds in front of the gates, but not the gate itself. The fire department would have some.
Well, I guess what the main thing I have, and I didn't really notice the reflective. I'm glad to hear they have the reflective stuff on it, so at nighttime people can see it. But basically, a gate that's just half open, that isn't chained back when it's open, to me, is a liability for everybody in that neighborhood, but also it is a very pronounced safety hazard. So, I mean, that's the issue I'm having with the gate.
Commissioner Gray?
Well, I had a question concerning, as Harry was mentioning, an interim possibility that the gate could be installed until 50% of the subdivision is built out, and then it would be revisited to here to see if the gate should return or be removed, since there's more people living there, as seems to be indicated that the more people are, the less chance of misbehavior. Would this solve the problem that we're not actually setting precedent for long-time gated communities walling off, and since there's actually no walls out there and pedestrians can still go through and enjoy the place, that for safety and health factors only, we have a temporary gate till half the subdivision is built out and then revisit whether it needs to be removed or kept up. That's open to...
Or maybe on your line, once it's built out, it's just left open during the day, and then they can close it up at night.
Does the commission need to address the issue of the temporary gate right now, Paul?
You know, here's what I would suggest. If it is the commission's desire to maybe allow for a temporary gate until, say, for example, 50% of the lots have been built out, we would be happy to take your direction and go and do some research in the temporary gate and come back with findings for approval with any modified conditions that would help to address your issues relating to the safety. In talking with ESD just now, looks like there might be some issues about still having turnarounds in that area, just even though it is temporary. So we'd like to maybe take some time to go back and take a look of how we could address it if it's your desire to do that. Happy to meet with the applicant and try to make that, come back with you with a packet that you can, based on your direction, can approve.
If we do nothing, is it a violation of county ordinances right now to have that gate in place?
That's correct.
So what might follow logically then is an order to remove, right?
That's correct. We would contact our code enforcement office and proceed with the abatement process.
Okay. So when you say you want additional time to consider this, does this mean continuing this matter, or phrase it in such a way that it gives you some discretion with respect to establishing the guidelines for this temporary
Well,
gate?
I think what we would like to get is some direction from your commission as to what you're looking at here, whether it's what's the applicant's proposing, a full gated entry, or maybe a temporary gate that's more of a Forest Service type gate. So if you provide us direction, we'd be happy to go back and, again, come back with findings and conditions that relate to your direction.
Great.
And in the commission's consideration of direction, what ESD has also pointed out is there is an offer of dedication on this road, which then factors in, should the county ever accept this as a public road, it couldn't be blocked. So that may factor into the commission's consideration of a temporary or a gate that would be for so many years. If so, what kind of gate? And I just wanted to make sure the commission was aware of that particular fact.
Thank you.
Okay, well, to me, I'm in concurrence with what you're saying, Paul. I really don't feel that at this time we should build a permanent gate on this road, though I'm sensitive to the issues that are happening on that ridge. And so I would be, myself, I'd be very much go along with the idea to take a little time to see if we could come up with a temporary gate that meets the county's proposal, and say after the subdivision is built out 50%, then at that time take a look at removing the gate.
Would we want a gate that's appealing to the public?
No.
Or you just want a Forest Service gate?
A 2x4 on a couple of posts.
I think the gate would, the safety factor of the gate would be the most important factor, not the appearance.
Yeah. But it would be strictly temporary. Jeff, you have been busting to say something.
I don't have a lot of heartburn with a permanent gate, to be honest with you. I think it's set back far enough off the road. It's kind of partially around a corner. It's not an in-your-face gate that's right out there on the roadway. There's plenty of room for vehicles to come in and stack, to make a U-turn and all that. Those are things that the applicant's going to have to do even if they have a temporary gate up, I believe, or you're going to have problems out on the street. This is architecturally pleasing what they're proposing. I think it will actually help sell their lots and fill out the subdivision faster. I think a Forest Service gate is probably detrimental to lot sales efforts out there, just in appearance alone.
Going along with that same thing, the distinction between a temporary and a permanent gate is, I have a hard time with it. This is, as proposed, could be a temporary or a permanent gate. I mean, what they've already got, they don't need to have it reconsidered if they built what they have. And if 50% of the lots were sold and we decided we didn't want the gate, they just take out the metal gate part and they're open. They haven't changed anything. They don't have to make a distinction between temporary and permanent.
I think what they have wouldn't meet the standard. So
I'm
they
not
would have
interested
to
in
be.
what they have, what they're proposing. If they built that and we said, okay, now it's going to be taken out, all they do is take off the metal fence part that swings. Everything else stays the same. So they don't have to go with two different fences, or gates, excuse me. They can just put in the gate as they propose, and if they build out and we decide we don't need it or want it there anymore, they just take out the two movable parts and everything stays the same.
But this would be a permanent gate. It wouldn't be.
Well, permanent is not, there is no such thing as a permanent gate. You build it, you take out part of it, now it's gone. So
Well,
it's not permanent.
as far as this discussion goes, it would either be permanent or it would be taken out.
No, it's a temporary gate, no matter how it's built, and if, when 50% of it's built out, we decide if it's temporary.
So are you agreeing to a temporary gate or a permanent?
No, it's not temporary or permanent. It's just a gate. And the temporary or permanent part comes after 50% of the build-out. We determine whether it's going to be stayed there or
Well,
not.
it's not going to come back to us at that point in time.
Yes, it will. We tell them it does. We can tell them it does.
We can specify that it's temporary and expires at some date specific, and then...
Well, it comes back to us to decide, and 50% of the lots are sold.
Mickey, are you saying you'd like to see it like this?
I have no problem with the way it is, and that becomes
Okay, all right.
either temporary or permanent on our decision, nothing with the building itself.
My recommendation would be to defer to staff with respect to the design guidelines for a temporary gate, but to address as a commission what to do about the permanent gate. And my sense is that this is the story, as you said, Larry, we've heard so many times, and it's premature at this point because the lots aren't built out. Is there any more discussion, or shall we move this along and have a motion of some sort? Harry, you look like you're about to speak something.
No, I wasn't going to say anything more.
Okay, maybe you should. Okay.
I would make, are we going to make a motion, or are we just going to?
I'll entertain whatever you want to do.
Okay, well, I would make the motion that we defer to staff, much the way you just stated it.
In other words, defer to staff for the design of a temporary gate, but otherwise disapprove a permanent gate?
Yes.
Okay, that's your motion. Is there a second?
Let's hear that again. Either a temporary gate or?
No, it would be design a temporary gate and disapprove a permanent gate.
Well,
For staff.
couldn't this be the temporary gate too?
Well, we defer to staff on what it looks like.
Yeah, we're not designing the gate here today, just,
No, I would hope that staff would be meaningful or accepting what the residents would like to see in their neighborhood.
They may not want to spend that money if they think it's
Well,
going to be.
that's
overcome.
true, yeah.
Rich, as part of your motion, do you want to define temporary? When does temporary end?
well, I would say when the subdivision is half-built.
Half-built, does that mean occupied? 50% of the lot's actually occupied?
Yeah, I would agree to that, yeah.
Okay. Paul, does that?
What's more technical, is this owner occupied or?
I'll defer to you, Harry.
Okay. Paul, do you understand the motion?
I understand that. The question would be is, do you want this back in front of the commission with, or are you going to actually approve the temporary gate and let us go and take care of all the
I think Rich's
issues?
intent was to allow you to decide what the temporary gate looks like.
Okay.
To express to you the commission's desire that a temporary gate be allowed, that the permanent gate be denied, and then the homeowners can, when it's 50% occupied or later, repetition for reconsideration if the problems still continue at that time.
Okay.
And they still have the opportunity to appeal your decision if,
Appeal your decision.
okay, okay.
Yeah, this, our appeal, you mean our decision?
If the residents cannot agree with staff's recommendation, they can ask to bring it back to the commission.
Okay, well, they can always come here for dispute resolution because we're
Right,
so.
okay.
All right. We have a motion. Was it ever seconded?
Second.
It is now. Any further discussion? Okay.
I have a question. Now, what exactly is going to be the difference? Why the definition between temporary and permanent? If we're the ones who are going to make the decision at 50% build-out, we decide then whether it's temporary or permanent. Right now, we're just going to give them the permission to build a gate, period. And 50% of build-out, we determine whether it's temporary or permanent. So we don't need that word in there, conditioning anything.
I think the motion determines that it's temporary up until the 50%.
But why wouldn't it be permanent up till the 50%?
Well, that's not the motion.
Oh, okay, just as long as it's as yours, okay.
The entitlement expires at some time in the future is what we want to have happen. Permanent implies that it goes forever. Okay, any more discussion on this matter? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Nicole, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Abstain.
Mr. Moss?
No.
Mr. Crab?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Brentnall?
Yes. Okay, so the motion passes. 4 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstention. So with that, we'll conclude this matter. There are appeal rights, I believe. If you disagree with us and you want to appeal this to the Board of Supervisors, you're free to do so. You have 10 calendar days to do it. You file your appeal at the desk up here, and there's a fee of $495 associated with it. Okay, that concludes this matter. I'm going to do one more matter, and then we'll take a break. We have an item scheduled right now for 10:45, which is the conditional use permit modification for Miners Ridge Family Apartments. What? 10:45. Oh, that's 10:30?
No, 10:30 is the Quarry Ponds.
Quarry Ponds is 10:30.
Yes.
That's you, right?
Yes.
I'm skipping over you.
Oh, you are?
Yep.
Seriously?
Yep.
Quickly.
Seriously.
You'll be right back, and we're going to take a break before we come to you anyway. Okay, I'm going to 10:45, Paul. There's a motion or a letter request that we have to continue this matter, and I wanted to address that rather than have everybody sit here for the next half hour and then address that. So we can't do that, can't we? We've passed the time for hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 10:45, so it's timely to take that up.
Okay, then who's the presenter on that I caught by surprise?
It is Mike.
Mike Wells.
Oh, Mike Wells.
He went home.
Oh, Mike left already. Well, Paul will cover for him. He always does. He's a good man.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, we have requests for the Miners Ridge apartment complex for a continuance on that item. So we would request that you consider that at this time.
We have the letter. Is this a continuance to a date certain or to just open time?
We would suggest that you continue it to a date certain, and that would be May 13th at 10:05.
Okay. And I know that the applicant is here.
Good morning. I'm Chris Stewart on behalf of USA Properties. They're the applicant. We have requested a continuance to May 13th, as noted, to give us some additional time to work with staff on conditions and of some of the elements of the project.
Okay, very good. May 13th at 10:05 acceptable?
That's great.
Okay,
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so we have a request for continuance. Is there a motion to so continue?
I would so motion.
And second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay.
Mr. Brentnell, before you continue it off calendar, I think it would be appropriate, because this was noticed and there was nothing in the notice about a continuance, just to see, although it would be appropriate if you wish to continue any testimony, if people were here to comment on this, so that if they can't come back on the 13th.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there anybody here who wanted to comment on this matter who can't return on the 13th? Seeing nobody, then I guess that's fine. Thank you, Scott. Let's take 5 minutes and then we'll reconvene. Okay, let's rock and roll. We'll call now the 10:30 item, which is the appeal of a zoning administrator decision, variances sign permit at Quarry Ponds. And Leah, now I'm not joking.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, so yes, I'm Leah Rosowska with the Planning Department. As you said, we are here to discuss the appeal of the zoning administrator's decision to approve a variance for 2 tenant names on a shopping center sign rather than the 8 tenant names that were requested by the appellant, the applicant for the project, and that's at the Quarry Pond Center in Granite Bay. And I think you're all probably familiar with the Quarry Pond Center, but just in case you're not, this is where it's located on Douglas Boulevard, on the south side of Douglas Boulevard between Barton Road and Sarah College is a little ways to the west, but it's right there. And this is just an aerial shot of the site. And the slide is missing some information, but let me just tell you.
That's the site?
It had more information earlier, I promise. It's zoned C2.
Someplace in Granite Bay.
Yeah, I would have noticed that, I'm sure. It's zoned general commercial, combining a use permit, combining design scenic corridor. I just wanted to let you know that this project was originally scheduled for the March 11th Planning Commission hearing, but there was a scheduling conflict, so we moved it to today. So let me just talk a little bit about the proposed project. I already showed you the location. What we're talking about is there's a sign right here. It's actually 2 signs. I don't know if you can see very clearly, but this is a sign and this is a sign. They're monument signs. And then one over here. And what the applicant is requesting is that the existing signs be modified so that, and this is the existing sign, so that they can, they wanted to add the names of tenants down below. So let me show you what that would actually mean. I have some photos here. If you want to look at this one, this is the existing, one of the existing signs, but they all look the same. If I understand correctly from the appellant and / applicant, this portion, this kind of metal framework would be moved to the top of this existing concrete area, and then those tenant names would be added here. And I'm going to just go back a little bit. Okay, so the zoning administrator on January 21st of this year took action to approve a variance, as I said, to allow for 2 tenant names rather than the 8, and that decision is what is being appealed by the appellant. And the reasons stated by the appellant, as you probably saw in your staff report, are 1, that 2 signs are not enough, and 2, that essentially the county should be doing whatever it can at this point to help local businesses, small businesses, because of the current economic situation, the difficult situation. So I'm just going to run through staff's responses to the appellant's reasons for the appeal, and those are also in your staff report. But essentially, I just wanted to point out that the zoning administrator did take action to approve the 2 individual tenant names as it represented what he felt was a minimum departure from the requirements of the zoning ordinance. He also was attempting to give the appellant something to that would grant her request, but also keep the project more in line with signs in the general area. And most of the signs in the area, I have some photos here, are really just the name of the center, so it's hard to see this one. I was trying to do a drive-by. But these are all just the names. This one there is 1 tenant name here. I think that was maybe that Stupid Prices shopping center. Here are some more. This one, there is one doctor's office, medical office is right up at the corner of Auburn Folsom Road in Douglas. But then essentially, most of these do just have the name of the center. So the zoning administrator did feel that granting the 2 names would give, like I said, the appellant something, but not be such a great departure from the zoning ordinance. Additionally, the zoning administrator cited concerns for the potential safety for travelers along Douglas Boulevard. If there were 8 tenant names on the signs and people were trying to read those as they passed by, there could be a concern with safety as people are slowing down to see all of the signs. Also, the zoning administrator took action, based his action upon the fact that the sign requirements for just the shopping center name are set forth in the zoning ordinance, the design guidelines, Placer County design guidelines, the Granite Bay Community Plan, and the Quarry Pond signage criteria. So all those documents were very clear that what was permitted was a monument sign that identified the name of the shopping center only. And additionally, the appellant was not able to illustrate that there are special circumstances based on size, shape, topography, or any other physical characteristic that would warrant approval for the 8 tenant names on the sign. The second reason that the appellant gave for the appeal is that the current economic climate necessitates as much assistance as possible to the Quarry Pond Center and to Placer County in the state of California, it says. Again, the decision that the zoning administrator made was based on the consistent application of county standards regarding land development, and of course, in this case, specifically signage. Again, the standards that are contained in this case are in those documents I mentioned earlier. And they do address, those documents address these issues based on public safety and health and aesthetics. So again, although the applicant did cite the current economic status, climate, as a reason for requiring these additional tenant names, again, the zoning administrator felt that the appellant was not able to demonstrate special circumstances having to do with the property or the site that, again, would warrant those 8 tenant signs rather than the 2. Additionally, I wanted to let you know that this project has gone to the MAC actually twice. It went once as an informational item on July 1st, 2009, and then it went again just this April 7th as an action item. And in that case, the MAC did vote 3-1 in favor of approving the appellant's original application to allow for 8 tenant names on the monument sign at the center. So with that, staff does recommend, here's our recommendation to make it clear, that the Planning Commission take action to deny the appeal and uphold the zoning administrator's decision to approve the variance to allow for the placement of no more than 2 individual tenant signs on the existing monument signs, and that's based on the findings in the staff report and subject to the conditions. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about this.
Okay, it seems to me that there's some standards for the size of lettering and the speed. You know, different speeds of, down roads would require different sizes of lettering.
I'm not familiar with that from the planning department's perspective. It's just that there are size requirements for lettering for the signs. No, I'm getting an agreement from Paul.
The head shake here, I guess.
Okay. So no,
I guess what my question is, are people going to be able to read these signs as they're driving down Douglas Boulevard?
well, when staff originally came forward with this proposal, that was our main concern, was that having that number of small signs that people are trying to read was a concern, and I think that was one reason that the zoning administrator took action to approve just 2. But, you know, I guess that's, I'm sure that everybody involved would have perhaps a different opinion as to whether or not you'd be able to read the signs, but professionally and personally me, I don't think that it's something that would be easily read or conducive to, you know, safety along the road while people are traveling.
Okay, so then if it's just 2 signs, then what do they, just toss a coin to see who gets to put their name on a sign?
My understanding, and I'm sure that the appellant can clarify this, is that it's based on the size of the space leased in the center.
Okay.
The larger the size in the center, the priority you would have on the sign.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I know that when a lot of centers get built, there's a standard condition that goes on the landscaping that basically says 50% of the parking lot needs to be shaded at maturity.
Okay.
Is there a similar type, I mean, when this was built, was that similar condition put on that center?
I have to say, I don't know what the conditions of approval for the conditional use permit were related to that. And unfortunately, I don't think I have those conditions with me.
I guess the way most are planted, as the landscape matures, the visibility of the signs on the building get less and less. Well, today it's relatively new. You can look and say, oh, I can see those signs on the building from Douglas Boulevard. as the landscape matures, I think that's going to go away. And I guess, so my question would be, is it safer to have them squinting to read building signage through trees down the long run than it is a smaller sign on Douglas Boulevard?
I don't know. That would probably have to be something that the Planning Commission would have to come to an agreement on.
I had one question. Could you go over again the original reasons for the variance to be granted in the first place?
Do you mean that the appellant's reasons for requesting the variance?
No, for the zoning administrator's variance being granted in the first place.
Oh, okay, for him approving the two signs at all? Oh, okay. Yes, he was, he cited that granting the variance to allow for two signs would help the appellant to get some exposure as she was requesting for the center, but would also represent, as I said, a minimum departure from what is actually required. So that was his giving as much, basically, as he could without feeling like he was creating a public health or safety risk.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
The speed limit along Douglas in that area, I believe, is about 55 miles an hour.
Yes.
It is very difficult to read anything going 55, and a lot of people are going faster than that there. So I can understand difficulty in reading signs as you go down Douglas. And when the lettering is as small as it would be on a sign with 8 names on it.
I know that the MAC specified that it be, when they recommended the approval, that it be 8 inch, so that the lettering would be 8 inches. So that is.
Any other questions for Leah? Seeing none. I have a quick question for Karen. On an appeal like this is an appeal de novo. We have the authority to either grant the appeal at 2, deny the appeal in its entirety, or to reestablish our own standards for the sign. Is that not correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Thank you. Okay, Leah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is the applicant here, and do you wish to address the commission? If so, come forward.
It is still good morning, so I'll say that to you. First, Mr. Moss, to answer your question about...
You want to state your name first for the record?
I apologize. It's Lisa Powers. Okay. To answer your question about our tree planting, one of our conditions of approval was that we meet all normal standards of county shopping centers, and we were required to have quite a few trees, and they will be growing, and upon maturity they will reach a height that definitely will hinder the viewing of the names from the street. The reason I brought the appeal is not that the zoning administrator granted, it's not only that they granted only 2 names when up to 8 were requested in the original application. It is mostly that it's not only that it's only 2 names, but they must be the very same 2 names on each of 3 signs. When the hearing was closing, I asked a quick question, the zoning administrator hearing, could they be different tenant names, which would really allow us then to place 6 tenant names on our signs. And as you see in the application, it shows up to 8 that I felt would qualify for placement up there. And perhaps no one had time to really think through the answer of that question, but the answer came back from the ZA that no, it would have to be the very same 2. And that was really the reason why I'm here today. I very much appreciated the approval of what we're seeking, and I do feel that in the presentation that was made to the zoning administrator, both in person and in writing, that the center made its case of special circumstances for needing tenant names on the monument signs. The special circumstances we face being on Douglas Boulevard and not being adjacent to any type of traffic signal mean that we are a center which is built back from the road on purpose to allow the public access to the beautiful and the viewing of the beautiful ponds, the natural area and open space which is behind us. We are not back from the road for a reason consistent with a center up here on Auburn, Highway 49, and Bell Road, which has this enormous parking field in the middle of it, and all the buildings are at the exterior, which is really the old style of building a center. And we see a lot of those in Texas, for example, where they have these enormous parking fields. My purpose in designing it that way was to encourage people to come to the rear of the site and to enjoy the entire hardscape, which is a very double-sided hardscape that's both front finished and back finished, so that our tenants have an option to have true al fresco dining, which looks outside. It's one of our real anchor uses. In fact, maybe the main anchor use in today's economy. So that is a special circumstance, I think, benefits the area, the constituency, and the customer and the tenant. This other special circumstance we face by being on Douglas with no traffic light at Berg today is that the speed with which people travel, and they cannot read the tenant names on the buildings because of the speed they're traveling at, and also the fact that the buildings are so much further back from the road than the minimum allowable footage, which I could have chosen to be frontally placed, which would have been, I believe, probably within 100 feet. So we are now approximately 400 feet back from the road. The third reason, going back to the special circumstances, there have been, I haven't researched all the variances, but there have been several variances requested for tenant names on monument signs in Placer County, and they have been granted for reasons that are comparable to ours. One in particular is the Dry Creek Center here in Auburn, which had many tenants, and they were also very far from the street. They were on a busy road, and there was not necessarily a traffic signal nearby. So, not wanting to disagree with staff, I get along with them quite well, but I think intellectually I must on that one point. The issue of economic rightness is that this is a difficult time for everyone. I think is something that doesn't really need to be stressed. It's something that unfortunately our entire country is living through, and we will be grappling with our problems for a few years to come. The issue of public safety is one that I do take seriously. We have always done that because we're worried as a center about the speed. We hear from our customers, and our tenants do too, about how difficult it is for them to get in and out, how they'd like to come more often. A lot of people object to having to go down and make a U-turn to leave the center. If they're leaving from the middle gate, they must go down and do a U-turn, cross a busy road with a busy traffic stream, and either be very patient and wait a long time or make a U-turn that maybe some will deem not to be very safe. And I see that all the time. I'm there fairly often. I also feel very grateful that staff, county's planning staff, in its first report did not support this application at all, but in their second recommendation now, they are supporting the two names, and I thank them for that. I did do some research and did pull up from the California Institute of Technology in Southern California, a very well-known engineering school, their recommendations of maximum distance where you could read a sign and relating that to speed with which one is traveling. And I have a handout to give you if you'd like to see it.
Okay. Are we going to share this, or did you make enough? Oh, wow. Okay, so you've given us a single document titled at the top, Signs Manufacturing and Maintenance Corp. Oh, no, there's apparently two pages, okay.
Right. The second page talks about maximum impact reading time, and the areas I've noted are 8-inch letters up to 8 and 12, basically is what I'm trying to highlight there. Our brains, fortunately, read very quickly, and the traveling, if we say an average speed might be 40 miles per hour. The maximum speed out there is posted at 55, but it's often much more than that. However, many people, fortunately, as time goes on, frequent the center, and they do slow down a bit when they come in, and there's some waiting time, as well as there are slower drivers that, you know, speed up and slow down near the center. So I think we would say that an average time driving by might be somewhere between 40 and 60, in that range. So that would tell us that we have, I think, ample time to read a name if it's somewhere between 8 and 12 inches high. Perhaps thus the optimum height might be 10 inches. And if that were the case, then I'm kind of a problem solver by nature, and I would choose a middle ground and say, well, if the space that we have is finite, then how many names can we judiciously, safely, rightfully put in that space and have it look good and not look tacky in any way, and yet also do the job it needs to do, which is to inform the public while driving by what tenants are there so that they can avail themselves of those tenants. And I think 10 inches is a good suggestion. If we do that, then the signs as proposed, and I'll explain in a moment exactly how that works, would allow for 6 names on each sign. If that seems a little too much to some people, there could be 4 names on each sign. But if we allow for them to be different names, we could then also put on the more western sign 4 names of the major tenants on the western half of the parcel, and we could put on the more easterly sign 4 names of those tenants on the eastern side of the parcel. And in the case of the western side, that would be Hawks Restaurant, J. Christian Spa and Salon, Capital Cellars, wine merchant, who is moving in within a month or so, and then hopefully a new tenant to be announced for more space. On the western side, we would probably put Toast Restaurant. Unfortunately, our former pizzeria, Pizza Antica, vacated March 22nd. And I think by way of explanation, their vacating was mostly a geographic decision on their part. They're a Bay Area-based restaurant group, and their Bay Area units were starting to have troubles economically, and they had to cut off the satellite to help save the whole. However, we're sorry to lose them, but another favorite tenant of ours, people at the center, is Artisan Meat and Fish, formerly known as Vandy Rose Artisan Meat and Fish. And the reason they're no longer Vandy Rose is that Vandy Rose in Iowa went under and announced plans to close the store. And my reaction was, even though I had personal guarantees and all the lease from the principals of the company, my reaction was that since that was one of the most favorite tenants of our center and it served a very strong need in the community for a quality butcher where you can buy meat that's not under plastic, that the center cancel the leases and take over the store in exchange for a removal of the guarantees. And so Quarry Pond Center now owns Artisan Meat and Fish, which we run happily. So moving along to some of the other issues that are on this, with the sign, as you saw in the picture that Leah showed earlier, our logo part and actually the entire framework on the top left is all metal, a piece of metal, and that can simply be lifted up and placed higher on the sign block, and thus freeing up the lower fascia for metal letters to be put on there. The height of the sign is a bit high for my taste, but you see through it. We're using the airspace. And I think because of the fact that it won't be a solid, sign, it will just be like a portable sign or one you can see through, I think it'll actually look nice and kind of different. It's analogous to the Rocky Ridge Center on Douglas down in Roseville, which has a logo that rises above their sign fascia, and it's quite attractive. We may paint it with a more, impactive color than the medium bronze we have now. Everything at our center, we don't have any black metal there at all. It's all medium bronze because it was meant to match tones of the earth. So the other criteria I think important to mention is the Granite Bay MAC's opinion on the matter. And as we all know, the Granite Bay MAC in the past 20 years or so has been a very conservative body that had strong opinions about what was done in its community, and rightly so. The MAC, however, in the July 9th hearing, most voted for the signs on the monument signs, the tenant names, not some. And in the recent hearing where county planning asked me to go before them again in April to get an opinion, to see if there had been a change of opinion before this item was heard here, we had really a substantively unanimous vote with the one dissenter of, there were 4 votes, 3 said yes, 1 said no, and that was a gentleman who thoughtfully said that he felt it was more important, rather than merely voting yes on this one issue, to form a committee within the MAC to address signage in Granite Bay, because he felt it was the duty of the MAC to help assist all of the local businesses in Granite Bay and in our community to have them succeed. I felt it was important to explain that one dissent to you. I was, of course, we were all very taken aback by their support. So my last comment is this issue of precedence, which is one that was mentioned by several people. There's a very almost anti-progress group in Granite Bay. They'd like to see it stay as it is, and they are always at the MAC meetings and have opinions, and the opinions expressed by the people that represent this group this time were that it would represent a precedent and therefore was worrisome. I actually think that any precedent that keeps this community alive and the center alive, we are not a strip center, we are like a community center in that community, is a good step. Any precedent that encourages local small business in the United States of America is a good precedent, and I would support that.
Okay, so you're agreeing that it is precedent setting?
I don't think it is legally. I think it is philosophically and business-wise. I think legally it could be a precedent. And then to that comment, I would say that Placer County is one of the few counties in the entire state or country which does not allow tenant names on its monument signs. So it's in the minority as to its provisions anyway. Not that I'm saying it's bad or good. I'm not calling Placer County's ruling bad. I'm just saying that I think that it's warranted. I think we have met the special circumstances, and I believe that's what a zoning variance is for.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Before you leave, do any of the commissioners have questions for Ms. Powers?
I guess I'm puzzling over the charts here. Maybe I wasn't listening good enough, but anyway, when I look at it, it seems like, it sounds like most people would think that people are driving 60 miles an hour on Douglas Boulevard. The speed limit is 55. Though I imagine people that are looking for something are going to be going a little slower. But if you have an 8-inch sign, it appears that they would have about a second to read it, and I look up there and you may see one line, but that doesn't provide for somebody to read all 8 lines on the chart. And
right.
So I guess what I'm struggling with is how would that really benefit the businesses if they can only pick out one of the 8 that they're reading in terms of the variance here, if it was 8?
Correct. Well, I rather agree with you on that point, and I think that's why we have comment and we thoughtfully proceed on issues such as the one I brought. My original request was to have up to 8 names. Where I thought 8 might be appropriate is that when people are turning into the center, they're driving maybe 10 miles an hour. And when they're driving 10 miles an hour, they may come in to go to Pizza Antica if they looked at that sign, for example. But if they saw that it also said J. Christian Spa and Salon, they might think, well, I should go try that. And it would be a matter of informing every user who came in, whether they're driving 40, 10 miles an hour, or even 60, some possibility of seeing it. Having been through the 2 hearings on this matter, this being, the second or third, including the MAC, I myself am beginning to feel that probably the best solution is either 4 or 6, but the predominant issue must be that they cannot or must not all be the very same tenants, because I feel a strong duty to benefit all of our tenants as much as I can in as equal a way as I can. I don't believe that the larger the business is, it should have more power anywhere. The only reason that's true in centers that anchor tenants get the monument sign placement by their tenant names is because it's a right that they insist on in their lease agreement. It's not because the developer says, well, I should put Rayleigh's. Well, you can see Rayleigh's from 20 miles away. So, and similarly for the end cap tenants in our center, Pete's Coffee doesn't need their name on the monument sign. You can see it up on their building because their building is close enough up. So that would be how I would, if we were to receive 6 or 4, I would base my decision as an owner on that. And I would not hold a Dutch auction for the placement on the signs, which is what I thought I might have to do when I left the last hearing. And I think that only 2 represents kind of a snafu. I mean, how do you decide?
Well, still, if you put 2 on there, and you put the most prominent ones or whatever, there's still, people are still only going to read 1, and so.
I beg, sorry, go ahead.
Well, if you just have 9 seconds to figure it out.
Yeah, I think I could read 2 signs in 9 seconds. Our brains read instantly.
Huh?
Our brains read instantly. Mine does, unfortunately or fortunately.
Well, you're lucky.
I think most people read, they see something and in many cases, it's a case of recognition. Like many people, Molly Hawks, who I believe is going to speak to you next, can tell you that customers will come in and say, oh my God, I didn't realize you were here. And when Hawks is a name they already know of, and then they see it on a sign, it takes the flash, the brain flash that we do is instant. Oh, there's Hawks, because they already know the name. So,
and they also know it's in the Quarry Ponds.
Many do not. Well, she'll tell you that herself.
Huh?
So many do not, and she will tell you that herself.
Well, don't people, when they're going to go someplace, they kind of look it up in advance? Because, like me, driving down the street at 10 miles an hour trying to find a shoe store on Douglas Boulevard, I'd be a hazard.
I'll let Molly answer that.
Huh?
I'll let Molly tell you that. But I think to answer your question, that these are people that were not already going there to the center because Hawks was there. And she can explain that better than me. It's her.
Oh, Molly is going to speak?
Yes, she is.
Oh, okay.
So maybe I should just let her speak.
Not yet. Are you done?
Well, I think I'm still confused, but for now I'm done.
Well, apparently Molly will erase all your confusion. Anybody else have any questions for Ms. Powers, other than me? I have a question for you. What has changed? I was here when we approved the center, and I remember the discussion about the U-turn coming out. That was a big deal, and it was a safety issue at the time, and it, at that time, was apparently acceptable. When the conditions were followed with respect to the monument sign and complying with the ordinance, that was acceptable. What's happened, other than the economy, that would justify a change? What wasn't persistent at that time that is now? Are you following my question?
I am. I'm just trying to think through every point of your question. What's
the point of the question? Is that?
No, I'm trying to think through every point of your question. So your question is, really, why didn't I bring this up before?
Yeah.
Do you want to know the honest answer to that?
No, I want you to lie.
I didn't know I could.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I don't buy that. And the reason is we negotiated everything with you. This was a long negotiated process over this.
I take exception to your not accepting my answer. I did not know I could. I don't lie. I tell the truth.
I'm sorry, that's falling on deaf ears. Do you have an answer to my question now, between what's different now than then?
What's different now than then?
Yeah.
I can't answer your question. I did not know I could bring a sign variance. I thought it was
That's
written in
enough. Thank you.
concrete.
Do you have any other questions for Ms. Powers? Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody in the public who would like to address this issue? Molly and the gentleman next to him. You guys choose who goes first. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Molly Hawks, and my husband and I are the chefs and owners of Hawks Restaurant in the Quarry Pond Center, or as many people in the public have come to know, the shopping center where Pete's Coffee is. in speaking to Mr. Johnson, I believe you were asking about clarification on how many signs a potential customer might read in driving by and seeing the signs. I don't have obviously the right answer as to how many names should be noted on the monument signs, but my thought is if there are multiple tenants noted on those monument signs, maybe today they'll see Toast Restaurant, but tomorrow in driving by they'll see the name of my business, Hawks Restaurant. So although they may not pick up multiple names at any one time, I know there are many families in the community that drive up and down Douglas and drive by our center every day, as well as there are commuters from neighboring towns. And so I think it would greatly help us to have our tenant names on those signs. Last time I was here, I spoke a little bit about how, for us, we never push, for Hawks Restaurant, we never pushed Lisa on having our tenant names on those monument signs when we first opened our business, because quite honestly, we didn't think it would be necessary. But we've come to realize over the last 2.5 years that our business has been open that we need to grasp at every marketing tool we possibly can to make the public aware that our restaurant is there and that we are open for business. And one of the things that I've realized recently, this is a time for a lot of charity. It seems to be the season for charity events in our area. So it seems like I've spent every Saturday for the last 2 months at different charity events where I go and I personally donate food, serve food to different organizations, and donate my time as well. And this allows me to be in front of, give back to our guests. Also puts me in front of many potential new customers, and allows me to tell them about the restaurant, where we are. And I'll often tell them that, they'll ask, oh, where are you located? A lot of people have heard of Hawks Restaurant, but they don't know where we're located. So I'll tell them we're in the Quarry Pond Center, and either they know where the shopping center is, or, and oftentimes they'll say, oh, I've been to Pizza Antica, but where are you in that shopping center? So it becomes evident that a lot of people come into the shopping center, they go to one store, but they don't necessarily look to see what else is in the shopping center. So it became evident to me that names on the monument sign would help guests know what other businesses are available in the shopping center. In addition, if I'm talking to potential guests about our restaurant and they don't know where we're located and they can't quite place Quarry Ponds in their mind, but I mentioned the shopping center where Pete's Coffee is, they know where we are. And that's because Pete's Coffee has such great street signage because they're an NCAP tenant right on Douglas Boulevard. And we're set quite back off the road, which I'm happy about because we have access to the beautiful patio on the pond. But at the same time, we need to, in order to capture the business that's driving by every day, I think we need to become more visible street side. And I was going to mention one other point as well that's escaping me at the moment. But
yeah, maybe this would be answerable before, but if you had two signs, like the zoning administrator had approved, who would the businesses be on that sign in that shopping center? Or do we not know that? Would you be one of them?
if there were, you mean with the previous agreement last time we were here?
No, the
Or-
zoning administrator approved two signs.
Yes, 2 names on each sign, right?
Yeah, two names on all, the same two names on all signs, I guess.
Yes.
And would you be one of the businesses that would be on the sign?
Well, I should sure hope so. At least
Is that because
never.
of your size, or?
I would assume so. You know, I would. It's something that we never spoke about actually with Lisa.
Yeah, I should
But-
ask the previous, I guess, person.
Well, it's on top on the drawing.
Huh?
Yeah.
Quarry Pond?
Yeah,
No,
restaurant.
Put it
Hawks
this way,
Restaurant, huh?
if I had to make my argument with Lisa, it's something I would push for based on our size. We probably, I don't know the facts, but I would imagine we're one of the largest, you know, we bring in one of the largest revenues in the center. And one of the opening tenants there, we've been there since the shopping center opened, and we're not going anywhere. We have too much invested, so.
So I guess what you're saying is probably there'd be somebody, if there's only 2 signs that were available, that it's probably some of the other businesses that would have to continue to suffer, not Hawks.
Would you repeat that, please?
If you have your name on a sign because 2 are approved
Yes.
already, then you probably wouldn't have this problem. You have your name on the sign.
I wouldn't have the problem of
I'm
asking.
talking about here today. If you can
Oh,
only
right.
have 2 instead of 8,
Yes,
and Hawks was on the sign,
yes,
then this wouldn't be your problem.
correct,
Okay.
so.
Okay, any other questions for, did you think of the other matter, or?
Oh, just that, I know there's also safety concerns because traffic moves at a high rate of speed along Douglas. But there are times during the day when traffic is slowed down along Douglas, when there's at those commuter times. I often leave the shopping center to go pick up my daughter, between 5 and 6 o'clock, and you can see at that time of day, the traffic doesn't move quite as quickly. And I know because it's always difficult to get out of the shopping center at that time. So those would be great times when people are driving home to, perhaps they're driving a little slower. It'd be a great opportunity to capture put that thought in their head. And once they see the restaurant name or the business name, they'll start to connect the dots. Like, oh, my friends told me that was a great restaurant. We should go visit there sometime. And now they'll know where we are. So and they keep seeing that name. And next time they're considering where to have dinner out for anniversary or Friday night out, they'll think of Hawks, they'll know where we are, and then they can recommend us to the next person, and that's how a business like ours will grow. So.
Okay, thank you. Any
You're welcome.
questions? I guess not. Sir?
Thank you. My name is Walt Gebauer. I'm a co-owner of Toast Restaurant. Okay, and I'll just reiterate some of the things that were said, but if there's only 2 on there, as it was pointed out, the logical way to decide who those 2 are would be based on square footage. The largest square footage pays the most rent, they get their names on there. I'd have a hard time arguing against that, but I wouldn't be on there, and that obviously doesn't make me happy. And I think if you look at the statistics that are in this, that Lisa said here, is that you look at the 8 that she just originally asked for, and that's a 10-foot wide, so each space is going to be 5 feet by 10 inches. So I think you could logically then, with a border, say you could put an 8-inch lettering in that. And if you look at this, and you've already pointed it out, Mr. Johnson, that's probably the upper limit, because you've got this 0.9 seconds to see that. So maybe, as Lisa's already pointed out, it's 6, but it's certainly more than 2. I do not understand the logic of 2 only. It just doesn't seem reasonable, and if you look at these statistics, that sign could hold more than 2 and still accomplish the purpose of that sign. Obviously, anything more than 8, you defeat the purpose of it. It doesn't do anything. The reason, and I think, and another thing you point out, Mr. Johnson, in that 9/10 of a second, are you going to read 8 or 6? No, you're probably not. But this is a statistic that now is several years old, but I think we were told that there were 55,000 cars a day go back and forth on Douglas. So these cars are coming and going every day. Every time they're going to look at that in that 9/10 second, they're going to see another name. I think Molly touched on that. So maybe you're not going to see the 8 the first time, but you're going to see that. You now know Hawks is there. Next time by, you find out somebody else is there. And so over a period of time, we all get that exposure. And to put more on there, even if I'm not one of them, even if it goes to 4 to 6 and I'm still not on there, obviously the more that we draw into the site, more that it attracts people, benefits all of us, even if I'm not on that sign. I still want to get more people on there than 2. 2, just the logic of that defies me. I just don't understand that. So I think it can be more. It clearly will not, it doesn't change the aesthetics of it anymore, but it allows more tenants to get the exposure, and this statistics will show that 8's the upper limit, but something more than 2 certainly would make sense, and we would certainly appreciate that. So that's my pitch.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Any questions for him? Lisa, just a minute. I'll give you the last word. Madeline, I was going to say, if you and Sandy, you're the only other 2 in here, do you want to come up and address us?
My name is Madeline Kalani, and I've lived in Granite Bay since 1968. And I remember this site when it was the boat storage area. And when Lisa put in this development, she realized where it was located. The traffic was 55 miles per hour at that time. There was no signal, no prospect of a signal, because the people to the north would not appreciate one simply because it's more of a rural area and they didn't want to have to pass through traffic at that time. I think part of it has to do with the fact of the economy, but also the high-end stores that she drew in. It isn't a place that people go on a day-to-day basis. Maybe the Pizza Antica, but everything else is rather high-end. Pete's, people will go to Pete's. It's on a curve. If you're coming from the west, as you come around the curve in Douglas Ranch, you see her momentarily and then it's gone. And the location was never suitable really for what she anticipated it. I think she had high hopes for it, but I think the traffic is such. Also from the east, when you're coming to the west, you have your median, and that's another issue to be considered as far as viewing the signage. I don't think it would be seen from the east. I think maybe within Quarry Ponds, having signage saying that Hawks is, or have an internal sign, Hawks is here, or even have smaller signs within, maybe, stating that Hawks is available and some other restaurants are available. And also on the MAC, it was a 3-to-1 vote. There's 7 people on MAC. And it wasn't voted for before, it's 3-to-1 now. Also the type of tenants, I think what might be helpful is if, such as pavilions. When I go to pavilions, I do not know. Pavilions is a site, if you've ever been into, you cannot find anything in pavilions, but they say the such and such is in pavilions, and then they'll have these master signs within pavilions stating, okay, here is XYZ restaurant, or whatever it may be. Otherwise, you're wandering through it. Unlike Quarry Ponds, that's not as serious. I mean, she is a U-shape. It's a little bit more difficult maybe for those in the back, but that might be more helpful, as if she stated that Hawks within Quarry Ponds, or a J. Christensen salon within Quarry Ponds. Once people have keyed on Quarry Ponds, once you're in Quarry Ponds, you really cannot get lost. You park and then there's the U-shape. I think she'd have good luck there. And so I would like to very much support what the county said. I really don't think you can see these signs. They aren't readable. If anything, it's going to be a traffic distraction. We have to be very careful of that, because the reason the speed limit on Douglas is as it is trying to get the traffic through, because probably 90% of it's passed through. It's become a bypass, and that and Auburn Folsom. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. And Sandy Harris.
Sandy
And Sandy,
Harris.
we do have, okay.
Yeah.
Sandy, we do have your letter, and
Yeah, I was
the
gonna
record should
mention
show that Harry Crabb had to leave
Oh, okay. My buddy Harris.
because of an appointment he had.
Sandy Harris from Granite Bay. I've lived there a long time, too, and I agree with what Madeline said, and I have sent a response to this. I'd like to point out that I think that's more than one variance, because to raise that sign, I think, may go beyond the signage size that's allowed. My brain may see all those signs, but my eyes don't see that well. I'd have to get closer to 8 inches to see them when I'm driving at 55 miles an hour. Lisa's done a wonderful job promoting this subdivision, or this center. She's had radio advertisements. It's in the paper. It's in the Granite Bay Golf Club newsletter. She has events there all the time. I get cards in the mail saying what's going on for the next month. She has karaoke sings, outdoors dancing, just everything you can imagine. And I think a lot of it goes beyond what was allowed in the conditions of approval. And I'm just wondering if county has kept track of how many variances she's asked for and how many conditions she has violated in her approval. Always pushing the envelope. Pete's attracts a lot of people, I'm sure, and once they get into the center to get their coffee, they have time to look around to see what's there. Pete's has little tables out there you can sit. If Hawks is attracting that much business that comes in there, as she just said, and they're well-known in the area, people coming to patronize Hawks would certainly see what's in there. So anyway, I would hope you would either deny the whole request or support what the zoning administrator approved.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Any questions for Sandy? Okay, there being nobody else in the room, I'm going to assume that the public has nothing else to say, and I'll cut off public hearing and I'll bring it back to the applicant for rebuttal, final word, whatever you want to add before we wrap this up, Lisa.
Thank you. I would just want to better address your question that you last posed and say that one of the reasons for bringing the variance at this time is obviously the current economy is difficult, and it will be for quite some time. How this has more recently presented itself or reared its ugly head is when Pizza Antica recently vacated. They have a large space. They have a 3,722 square foot space. Only 43% of our original tenants are still at the center, which is partly, well, I think mostly, not partly, because of the economy. You always expect some to fail, but not that many. And the small business in America has suffered through this problem much more than any other size of business. I feel a duty, if I only had 2 possible names in total, to give those 2 names to the tenants who were originally there. They've been the ones who've withstood the economy, and they're still standing. I've helped them as much as I possibly can to remain in business and not made them pay their full rent in most cases and helped to carry them, because it doesn't do a center any good to have an empty shopping center if there's no wherewithal to pay. However, with the recent vacating of Pizza Antica, I'm going to be hit with another salient issue, which is that any new tenant coming in is going to want their name on the monument sign. If I only have 2, and I have 8 or so tenants who are there now, who were there originally, we have 24 tenant spaces in total at the center, then it really puts our center at a competitive disadvantage. If you go down the road on Douglas Boulevard to Roseville, which is City of Roseville, they do allow tenant names on monument signs, which was part of my initial lease-up problem with the center, was most of our tenants did want their names on the monument signs. And I had to say, no, we're not allowed in Placer County to do that. I can't. And that's what I told each and every one of them. And we went ahead. And Madeline and Sandy's comments are correct. We do a lot of public events at our center. Unfortunately, those were 2008's and 2007's and part of 2009's budgets. I don't know, in fact, I do know, I can't afford to do those types of events this year. So we won't be. That's all.
Well, thank you for your comments. I can get the mic to turn on.
I got mine to turn on.
Now it's magically appeared. The boys in back are having a little fun. Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and comment. Rich, you want to lead away?
Okay, I guess the one question that comes up, and one of the proposals that was made is, if we're stuck on 2 signs, then what's the rationale that you can't have, you have 3 different, I mean, we're talking about 2, tenant names underneath the Quarry Pond sign, and we have 3 Quarry Pond sign. What's the rationale for preventing different names on those signs if they stick to 2 per monument?
I think, honestly, I don't think that we actually would have a problem allowing different tenant names. If you said that each monument sign could have 2 tenant names and they don't have to be the same, I don't think staff would have concerns with that. It was mostly a concern when the request was for 8 signs, where the idea was that somebody might get through 2 names on one sign and then get to another sign and realize it's different than the one before, and then to a 3rd sign. So I think it's more important if there were 8 names. I spoke with Paul. I don't think staff wouldn't have concerns if there were different tenant names, if they were only allowed 2 spaces on each monument sign.
Okay, good. And then maybe a second question. If they do get somebody to slow down and pull into the Quarry Ponds, and I guess the idea of internal signage,
internal directional signage.
Yeah, is that an issue that they'd have to address somehow before the,
I think that they would need to bring that to the DRC, the Development Review Committee, for approval. There are certain directory signs that in the zoning ordinance they're exempt from the sign ordinance, but if they were looking to have something out in the parking lot that would kind of direct people where to go, we would definitely want to have a chance to review that. I would think simply just for like sight distance issues and circulation, you wouldn't want to put a sign where you can't see when you're pulling out of one aisle. I'm not sure, but I would think that would be something that we would at least want to take a look at. I don't think there's any formal application process for that, assuming they meet all the setbacks and height requirements and size requirements, but that would be something I think that we could work with them on.
okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Well, I have one comment, just for notice to the rest of the board. I do not agree with the zoning administrator's variance to start with, and so my vote would, be considered in that direction.
Okay, what's the reasoning behind your disagreement?
With the original, because I don't think there was any special occasion to allow it to start with.
Okay. Larry? Any?
I don't have any comment.
Jeff?
I guess if I have a comment...
So you do have something.
Well, if I have a comment, I think it goes towards the ability to enter the place, because I think it is confusing. You don't want people to drive in and just start circling looking for a place that they think might be there. To have a sign inside once you get in that tells you that all of these various places are here and their number or whatever to identify them. But that would be inside the driveway somewhere. But I would think that would be a better solution to this problem than trying to put all these names that you can't read at 50 miles an hour. At least if there's a place to pull in, pull to the side slightly, and have a panel there that lists all the various occupants and their room numbers or whatever you allocate it, would be a better solution to this problem than putting all these out on the highway. I don't know. I guess to me that seems like a more practical solution and would encourage them to do that.
Yeah.
Well, to me, a sign that just puts up the name of the center, for all intents and purposes, is a waste. I mean, even when you're the Galleria Mall that everybody knows of, that promotes themselves tremendously, the tenants still want their names up on the outside of the building where they're visible from the street. It's two things. It's their visibility. It's also a little bit of tenant ego. They want to see their names where they're paying rent so they can tell people they're there. The value of it, can be questioned back and forth, but the necessity of it to lease the spaces is real. As far as the signage goes, definitely if we go with two, I would think that they should be different tenants on each sign, or actually at the owner's discretion. If somebody wants to come in and, put the armbar on Lisa to get them on all three, that's her choice. As far as who's on there, I don't really have, I don't think that's so much our concern as to how many get on there. I think as shown there, we're getting kind of small, but I think there's some compromise between none and some, that would be appropriate. I think if we could get those to where you have 10-inch letters in there, that makes them a little more readable. At least on the main double sign that's by the main entrance, maybe the third sign that's further down could be scaled down to have two or something like that. But on the main identity sign, there'd be room for a few more tenants. And that it be at the owner's discretion as to who goes on there.
Okay. Well, I start my analysis with the proposition that we're faced with not one but several ordinances that are binding upon us. One is the zoning ordinance. There are the design guidelines, the Granite Bay Community Plan, and the sign criteria that were part of this approval. And I start with a rebuttable presumption that I'm going to enforce those ordinances that were set by the Board of Supervisors. And I recall when the community plan was developed, there was a big issue about this sign. There are those who think it's stupid. that we not have individual tenant names on the sign, but we're not here to debate that. The ordinance was passed by the Board of Supervisors that said this is what it's going to look like in Granite Bay, and it is different than Roseville right down the street. And they didn't want the individual tenant names on there for whatever reason. So that being the case, then any project that comes before us that wants a variance has a set of standards to be met. Are there special circumstances that warrant a variance? Will it set a precedent? Are we giving a special consideration to them versus everybody else? And I can't jump over any of those standards. What are the special circumstances? Well, it certainly isn't the economy, as regrettable as that may be, because I can guarantee you if we granted a variance for in signs, they wouldn't come off when the economy improved. Is it the speed or the cars going by at a certain speed? I believe that instead of creating a better situation here, we're actually creating a traffic hazard or a distraction by having these signs up there. The interior signage might be a better solution, as you mentioned, Larry. What else was cited? That they're back from the road. You know, most of the shopping centers are back from the road. They're not near a traffic light. That was known when the standards were set up when the project was first put in. There's basically nothing that's changed from when the project was designed and negotiated, for lack of a better word, with the project owner to today, other than we'd like to have the signs. In my opinion, we just haven't made the argument for a variance to the sign ordinance. If the objection is to the sign ordinance, then the place to take that up is with the Board of Supervisors, not the Planning Commission, because we're kind of bound by the ordinances. So I'm with Mickey on this one. I think that Paul was being extremely generous when he granted the 2. Personally, I would deny the variance in its entirety. I'll get off my soapbox. Is there any other comments or discussion? Anybody want to make a motion? Nobody?
Well, again, I think it's appropriate for you to go ahead if you want. Well, I guess I'm going to lean toward the staff's proposal, since they've already been granted some leeway at the zoning administrator hearing, that we at least uphold that. As I recall, there was some issue that I wasn't sure how it, whether it spelled out. You said you didn't care whose names were on these 2 that were already approved.
Well,
And was that a...
the planning department, we don't take, we wouldn't weigh in on the names on the sign no matter what. But what I said was that I hadn't heard before today that one of the reasons for the appeal was that we had limited the names on the signs, that you had to pick the same 2 names for each of the 3 signs. So what I was saying today is that I don't think that the DRC would have a problem with that. That's not a concern, since there are only 2 signs. If there were 8, I think that becomes a whole different sign and a whole different set of concerns. But if there were just 2 spaces on each monument sign and they wanted to put different tenant names, I don't see that we would have a concern with that. And if I could just really quickly add, I don't know which way you guys are going to go, but if you do determine that they can put the 2 signs and so that metal frame is going to be raised up, I heard Ms. Powers say today, which I hadn't heard anything about this before this today either, that they would paint it a different color. Just let me know if you're going to go that way, because I want to add a condition making sure the DRC can review that color before it's changed.
Okay. Well, with that said, I'll follow staff's recommendation and their recommendation in the agenda, which
The appeal.
staff recommends that the Planning Commission take action to deny the appeal and uphold the zoning administrator's decision to approve the variance as outlined along with the findings in CEQA, and that it's understood that there is no prohibition as to whose name gets put on of the 2 that are being permitted under this, that's more of a clarification.
Okay, and if the color's changed, it needs to be reviewed by the...
Right, yeah.
Then we're approving the appeal
No?
with some conditions.
No, we're appealing.
Well, if that was the, if that's the,
Eliminate.
is that the motion?
Okay, remember, Jeff, we've got 2 issues on the plate. The first is we've got an appeal that we can act on, or We also have the application de novo, as if it was submitted to the county for the first time, and we can take action on that and effectively deny the appeal and take some alternative action that would overrule the zoning administrator's decision. Does that make sense? And what Larry is doing is addressing the appeal and saying, let's uphold, let's deny the appeal, uphold Paul, but we don't care whose names of the two, it's mix and match, we don't care, but it's subject to approval by the DRC with respect to frame color, something to that effect.
And I think I would further say that while it's not part of the motion, that I would encourage them to put interior signage and get permits for that to improve the identification of those people once the people pulled in immediately or something, however it could be resolved, but it's not part of this application.
Okay. We have a motion.
Okay, I need to clarify a couple of things, I'm sorry. With regard to the interior signage, I misspoke. We wouldn't be able to have anything out in the parking lot without a variance. There is a provision for exempt wall signage, so while Hawks might be at one side of the shopping center, you could have wall signage, a program throughout the center to direct people what is on site and where it is. And then the other thing I wanted to clarify, your motion would also need to include, I believe, the removal of condition number 2. So we can do that, where the tenant name shall be the same on all 3 monument signs. And the monument signs shall all include the center name. We'll just strike that condition in order to accommodate allowing them to put different,
Okay.
if you guys take that action.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there anybody other than me that wants to discuss this?
Talk with you.
Okay.
Can you wait till we're through?
No. I'm going to vote no on your motion, Larry, and here's why. I can't get beyond the variance de novo issue. I disagree with Paul. There was no grounds for granting the variance. I just don't think that it rises to that level. I would vote for a motion to deny the application in its entirety and leave them as they are, consistent with the ordinances, consistent with design guidelines, consistent with the community plan. Whether it's 2 or 8, I just can't grant a variance. Any other discussion based upon what I had to say?
Ditto.
I have a
I think
ditto.
Paul's an awfully nice fellow.
Oh, no question about it. No question about it. If that's the case, then let's vote on your motion. And Nicole, you might as well go roll call.
Oh, let's see. Yes.
Mr. Gray?
No.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Krabs absent. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Bretnall?
No. So the motion passes, the appeal is denied, and the zoning administrator's original decision stands as modified here by today's comments. Lisa, we're not the final word on this matter. You still have another appeal, right? You have 10 calendar days to file an appeal if you wish, and you do so over at the planning department desk, and there's a fee of $495 associated with that, and you can take it to the Board of Supervisors. Maybe that's the place to get the whole issue addressed once and for all on behalf of everybody. Thank you all. Is there anything else? I guess not. Then we are adjourned.